BW Thinking Law podcast. Kibida Carlos.
Hi Carlos,
How you be?
Good.
Hey, I got the work.
Sure.
It's been one of those weeks, you know. It's salaries next week, so
I completely understand you, Carlos. As a sole proprietor, and they're like, hey, yeah, master plan.
It's literally in business, your first 2, 3, 4 years, you're literally just working for overheads, you know, and if you don't have support, you'll be in trouble. So shout out to my wife, man. Thank you. I appreciate you. Because I guess when like you be because I like in the most So anyway, let's get into it.
Yeah.
There's been so much happening the last few weeks.
There has been quite a lot happening from a legal perspective, and so I couldn't, when you really want to talk about something, but because I wasn't well, it affected how my brain was functioning. So I feared certain things, I might start rambling and stuff. So I was just like, I see this, but
you just take a break from it. But you're good now. You're back to 100.
I'm back to 100%.
Okay.
Just catching up.
Okay.
Now.
Okay. And that's the problem, you know. Yes. Work doesn't stop, man.
Nope.
You're a friend of mine. He lost his mom unfortunately last week, and we had the funeral this past weekend. And on Monday, I passed by his house just to check on him, you know.
Yeah.
And he's not home. I'm like, Chief,
where are you?
You just buried your mom 2 days ago. Why are you moving? Oh, guy. Chief. He's like, Marana, that whole week where I was not active in the business, everything is falling behind. Now I was just like, man, growing up is such a nightmare.
Adulting is something else, right? And that's when you get to appreciate like a really good partner.
Yeah.
Because and that's why I always refer to my partner as my partner, right?
Yeah.
Because we are doing this life thing together in
100%.
Partnership. Yeah. Where I am weak, she is strong. Where she has her limitations, I have my strengths. You know what I mean?
100%.
So sometimes so it makes all the difference.
Oh man.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
I actually had no idea it was this bad until you mentioned it a few podcasts ago.
Yeah.
The deputy sheriff. And now it was being discussed in Parliament.
Yes.
And, were talking about how, no, these guys are reckless. These guys are doing things, a weird way. And that's when now I'm really paying attention to it. I'm like, because now even I think it was the chairperson of association, deputy sheriff, they're coming out making statements to say, okay, guys, and I'm just like, what's going on? What's the story around deputy sheriffs? What are they doing wrong? What's the problem?
Is there a problem?
It seems like it because it's being discussed.
Okay, and I like the fact that you said it seems like it, right? And I say this, and I'm going to explain it by discussing Kenya civil imprisonment.
Yeah.
Because the Kenya civil imprisonment also arose, right?
Yes.
And sometimes I find, and I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, or me just saying that then makes it seem like I'm
no offense. Get ready to be offended.
No. I don't mean it that way. It's just that, sometimes when people who are not in the practice of law discuss law, they miss the nuances that come with practice.
Yeah.
So the issue in civil imprisonment, and all of these things. And I could tell as a private practitioner, legal practitioner, that the person who is making that statement does not know how civil imprisonment works, right? And the way civil imprisonment works is that the person who is asking for another person to be imprisoned has to demonstrate to the court that this person can afford to pay, but they simply are not. right? So I cannot to rub together. I just produce my bank statements to the court, right? And I say, here are my bank statements. You can see every month, 100 pula, 50 pula. So I legitimately cannot afford to pay 50,000 pula. And the law says, in that instance, the court should not grant an order for civil imprisonment.
Okay.
And I say this because just last year, I had a similar matter. Where there's this debt against me, and ebera court for the matter, right? And I said to the court, it's a bank statement, right? From these bank statements, you can see Hormoto, Rana, right? And because the attorney on the other side, no, but Modi bank statement and the judge is like, so just because Notoja say 50 pula, yeah, no, have to like 200,000 worth of debt.
Yeah.
If legitimately 50 pula would that 50 pula actually make a dent in this debt enough for us to grant civil imprisonment? And it was denied because civil imprisonment is when a person can pay and they are refusing to pay. But if there's nothing, civil imprisonment in terms of the law should not be granted.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying this to give a comparison here, the deputy sheriff, to say that sometimes people don't know how deputy sheriffs work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a way that people think deputy sheriffs should work, and then there's the way that deputy sheriffs should actually work in terms of the law. So some of the times, just like lawyers, sometimes there are rogue elements in every profession, in every industry, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the times I have seen complaints against deputy sheriffs, and by simply because Muto oil is the subject of whatever it is, doesn't think that's how the deputy sheriff should be functioning, right? And I'll give you an example. If there's an order for eviction, right? Then deputy sheriff has to come and remove the goods from the house, right? And there are limitations to say yes, or to get access, right? As a deputy sheriff, because you're ordered by a court order. So to get access to evict this person. You get me?
Yeah.
Because deputy sheriff wouldn't say padlock gating when they are mandated by a court order to evict this person. Yes.
Okay. So now, okay, let me bring this question now.
Yes.
Because Hagerediza and Rabutala are talking about when they're discussing on a civil imprisonment in Parliament. The question that came to my mind then was, okay, so if it's not civil imprisonment, then what should it be? What recourse can the plaintiff get out of the situation?
Yes.
Now, I want to bring that question to you now, saying, if it's proven the person can't pay the debt, then civil imprisonment can't be used against this person, right? So what happens there in that instance? What recourse is granted to the plaintiff or the person who brought the matter?
Nothing, Carlos. Nothing, but that's the nature of the law, right? Or look, and we've discussed this when we talked about the debt management process, right?
Yeah.
You can get an order to garnish if they have income or a salary or whatever money coming from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But usually, by the time Marago civil imprisonment, there's nothing to garnish. There are no assets, right? So that's it. As the plaintiff, you just have to wait because your court order is valid for 30 years.
Okay, so you just wait until this person has something of value or income or something like that.
Hopefully, right? But sometimes that's just it. That's the end of the matter.
Yes, which is why I guess, financial institutions, I guess, they have to do their due diligence to make sure, can you afford to pay this thing back, or whatever the case is, or if you borrow money, you borrow it against this thing, this asset that we can.
Yes, for them to try and recover as much as possible. And I say as much as possible because sometimes they'll use them as security. But at the time they then try to sell to recover money, only covers 55% of the debt because of the market, because hierarchy and things of that nature.
So, as I like to say, so rare bazwana baska badi mana madi what you're saying to me now, this literally just blew my mind because I had no idea. I literally thought civil imprisonment is a way to say punishment essentially. Yes. Whatever the case is.
Yes, and that's the thing. Yes. Civil imprisonment is not punishment for the fact that a person cannot pay debt. It is a punishment for the fact that Muto can pay it, they just don't want to. You get me?
Oh, that is...
Yes, and that's the reason why I say to you, Carlos, sometimes when people debate legal issues and they're not practitioners and they don't know the nuances of how that thing works, it becomes problematic to have an in-depth discussion.
Yeah, because also, we can't run away from the I don't know if let's call it what it is, the political aspect of it, where I'm listening to the conversation, the discussion, and Rebutale is talking about how, batho ba kana ba tebe ba tsena mo jarateng ya motho bana ba le ho ha ba simolla a touch kwala di TV hape le ga bana etc. And now I'm thinking to myself, well, what does that have to do with the law? Take the children to the bedroom, and if you don't want them to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I just don't understand, and that's why I was talking about Kanya nuance. But sometimes a deputy sheriff would be doing his job, and properly so, right? But because people don't know how the job works, through their eyes, not in that particular profession, they think Sisitara Halang is wrong. There are people by an order for repossession of a car. Right? And then deputy sheriff had the key. And the key is an thing, and deputy sheriff drives off with the car. Then hey, and but there's an order that says the sheriff can take that car.
Which is now where there's always going to be this problem where people don't understand what there's the legal aspect of things, and then there's the moral aspect of this, and let's say to you know what I mean? And mola how tsena ganzi let's hold hands and because my thing is this, right? Like, as much as I understand the regular Motswana like myself, my thing is, there has to be something that deters people from taking other people's things and promising to return them. And then when it's time to do it, they refuse to do it. As you're saying, civil imprisonment is when you just choose not to. You can, but because we tend to more mathateng ha gore wena o batla gonna mo mentioning ya ngele rent se di turang ko jole dikole se di turang ya no na 20,000 time, it doesn't really matter to you because when every month you have to pay all these things about 50,000. It's just like, okay, dog, but something needs to happen to you. It can't just be dog, I can't cancel no, and then that's it.
Well, look, I'm not saying I am for civil imprisonment or against civil imprisonment, right? I have seen instances where civil imprisonment really works, right? Where and someone was saying in one of the radio stations. Right, and someone was saying something like, yeah, there's a lawyer who said, the family members somewhere and they end up paying. Right? Look, that's not the objective or how civil imprisonment works. But we have seen it happen where an order for civil imprisonment is given. Because usually, how order civil imprisonment is, it is suspended for about 30 days or 60 days, right?
Okay.
And this suspension, the debtor is supposed to pay the installment that's abokai to pay back whatever it is that they've been lent or they owe, right?
Yeah.
And it's only when they fail to pay those installments, then the civil imprisonment order kicks in, right? So it will say the defendant or first defendant or whatever will be civil imprisonment is granted, right? And is suspended for 30 days, provided the defendant pays 1,000 pula every month, right? Now, the problem that we tend to find, number one, people don't know how civil imprisonment works. So they're not able to go to court and say, the bank statement is I have nothing, right? Number one. Number two, people cannot say to the court, I can only afford 200 pula. And this is proof I can only afford 200 pula. So because ke tshwantse ke tshela le nna ke kopa go duela 100 pula ka kgwedi. Right? And the courts will order that you pay 100 pula ka kgwedi because that's what you can afford. But people don't say that. Kana motho o ka ba ikaletsa re nya ke ta duela 5,000 pula when they know they cannot afford 5,000 pula. Right? So I've seen situations where civil imprisonment has been granted, right? And I've seen situations where civil imprisonment they grantiwa, aya tronkong, abaja, ababuela mo tronkong simply because they cannot afford to pay. So in those situations where it's like trying to squeeze blood from a stone.
So then why do they keep going back if it can?
Because they didn't defend.
Or you can,
they
just figured,
okay, I cannot afford it.
Which goes back to what you always said about civil imprisonment, where people will be confused and think, okay, so once I go to prison, the debt is forgiven. So that proves even more, it's not a punishment because you go there, you come out. So if you don't handle your business, you still go back in. Okay, so essentially people must just understand if you are facing civil imprisonment because of that, you just need to defend yourself.
You need to defend yourself, speak to the courts with proper documentation. It is not enough for you to simply say, right? You have to say, here are my bank statements. I know there is orange money or my Zaka or whatever where you receive money. See, this statement, it's look, I haven't worked in the past 2 years. Maintenance. You need to explain to the court why you cannot afford to service this debt at this time. Right? And then the other thing, and stuff. No, actually, when an order for civil imprisonment is granted, it is the duty of the plaintiff to support motho mo teng ga kgolegelo. Right? When o kolotiwa, o tshwanetse gore o bo supporta motho o mo tsentseng mo kgolegelo.
Wait, what do you even mean?
I mean this. If, let's say, person A is owed by person B, and person A gets an order for person B because of failure to pay debt, then person A should be the one that pays for the upkeep of person B. So what that tells me, for civil imprisonment, then the creditors.
So this is like everyday upkeep. We're not talking body roll on it.
No, upkeep
the meals.
It's everything.
The electrical bill.
I don't know about electrical bill.
This is brand new information to me. So wait.
Yes.
But
so that's somebody from your pocket to pay for the upkeep of that person in jail. Which means government don't charge these people, but young people for debt.
Why is it that way, and why hasn't government been implementing?
Okay, I don't know. I'm just speculating. Well,
Yeah.
government hasn't been implementing.
Yes,
For all
yes,
I
yes,
know,
yes.
every month government is like, hey, bank so and so, so and so.
Here's an invoice.
How much, right?
Yeah.
I'm just speculating. Or if it's being raised, then it means there's a possibility government hasn't been charging these predators, right?
Yes.
And number two, this person did not commit a crime,
Yeah.
right? So they're not. What's the word? They're not. What word am I looking for? It's not the responsibility of the state to keep them in jail or prison, right? It's the responsibility of the state to keep people in jail and prison where they've been convicted of a criminal offense. Now you are the one that is saying, because this person owes me, I want them in jail.
Yeah.
And there's a court order that's given. Does not make it a criminal matter. That's why it's called civil imprisonment.
Yeah.
So because just like how government when it's a criminal matter.
That's nuts.
Right? But then what happens is that if a person is in jail for 3 months, for example, it is civil imprisonment. 10,000 every month. In 30,000. That is a debt that adds on to Sukolota Sasin Kolota.
Hey, Banna. So when upkeep, you're essentially it's your own money that you're yo. Okay, so I guess this goes back to the due diligence issue that I was talking about, where government is saying, no, you can't be irresponsible and hand funds to someone in the hope that they'll pay it back. And then when they don't pay it back, you come running to me, and then you want it to be my responsibility now to take care of this person inside the prison. So you have to do whatever you can before you give the person the funds. Before you go into any agreement, you have to make sure, is this person able to pay you back? Yes,
but you see, I think a lot of institutions do have very rigorous due diligence.
100%.
Unfortunately, you find there's so many things in life.
People lose their jobs.
That then cause a situation where this person is not able to service the debt.
But now, where does government draw the line where, okay, I guess you're saying if it's a civil matter, then it's different than if it's a criminal matter. But if I'm a plaintiff in a criminal matter and I take someone to court over the issue.
A criminal or civil?
A criminal matter. And say someone has done something to me. And then it's a criminal matter. And then I take them to court and then the court convicts them and they go to prison.
Okay.
That's the government's problem, yeah.
Okay, so this is how it happens, right?
Yeah.
If it's a criminal matter, let's say someone assaults you.
Yes.
You are not a party to the matter, right? It is the state through the DPP, right? Who is the prosecutor, and then the person who assaulted you is the accused person, and then you are simply the subject of the breaking of the law. Right, so PW1, the one who is the victim or recipient of this breaking of the law, right? But even in criminal matters, you can have a civil aspect to it. Let's say and stuff like that, and then a debt arises, and a debt arises from that interaction. You can sue them in the civil arena for like damages and compensation and things of that nature. So there'd be two parts to just this one interaction.
The O.J. Simpson thing where he lost the criminal case, but I think he won the criminal case, but he lost the civil case.
Yes, and that's because the burden of proof is very different in civil and criminal matters. So if the person is prosecuted and they're found guilty, and they are sentenced to a certain term of prison or a fine or both, then if we're talking prison, then they're taken there and the state is the one that pays for it. Yes.
That's brand new information. I don't want us to talk too much about it because, as I always say, I need people to call your office to get the proper advice. This is just a conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. So, But before we get into our conversation for today, our main topic for today, you mentioned something about the DPP and Rara Maotwana, the Minister of Justice. Correctional Services, etc. So he mentioned how one of the issues that they were talking about is how the DPP needs to stand on its own away from the AG's office.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand any of that stuff because I thought they all work together or something. I don't know. What's the story there with that?
So historically, Carlos Cora, I can remember the time before the things.
Yeah, yeah.
So historically, the DPP was a department under the Attorney General's chambers.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So within the Attorney General's chambers, you have your contract drafting, you have legislative drafting, you have things that deal with international conventions and relations, you have your civil litigation, and within civil you have civil defense and civil institution, and then you also had prosecution, which was under the criminal.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then at some point in time, the constitution was amended to make the DPP a standalone entity from the Attorney General's chambers.
Okay.
So now you have the Attorney General's chambers here and the DPP in a different area.
Okay.
The problem is, and look, I'm not saying this because I've been inside the inner workings of the thing, is I find that sometimes there's sort of like a mixing of duties between the DPP and AGs, where the AG is still seen as the parent to the DPP rather than the DPP being a standalone entity. And this is from an administrative standpoint. And that's the reason why when you are at the legal opening, right, the AG will be there talking about capacitation, not just of the Attorney General's chambers, but also of the
DPP's office. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So essentially what he wants to happen is, so I assume there's some sort of conflict or there's some sort of issue if they're the same thing. To a layman, what's the issue? Why was it removed to become its own department on its own? And why now do we want to create a proper separation? Because I'm assuming he was speaking about it under the budget Ministry of Justice. So I'm assuming then he's saying, okay, instead of my D being sent out to the AG's chambers and then everybody gets their piece from there, DPP must have its own entire budget over there. It probably does, but it's under the whole situation, the whole umbrella. So what's the conflict? What's the difference in their roles, and where did the conflict come about where now they have to be completely separated?
Okay, I have to first say I didn't hear his budget speech about the ministry. Okay. So I can only speculate based on the bits and pieces that I heard.
Yeah, and the way things are.
Yes, but people shouldn't take me as an authority on this.
We're just having a conversation.
I get it.
Yeah.
So the Attorney General's chambers is basically the civil arm of government, right? And by that I mean they deal with all aspects of the civil nature of government.
Okay.
And then DPP is more criminal in nature. Now, the issue that I saw, I don't know what the rationale for separation was, but the issue that I saw is that maybe if there's someone who's a civil servant, they go then maybe they should be able to be prosecuted by the DPP.
Something like that.
Yeah. I think it's because there's certain offices in government that are protected, right? And I'm using the word government loosely. Judges, for example, so that they are able to give judgments without fearing anyone and repercussions and things like that. And that should be the same for the DPP. The DPP should have security of tenure because they're the body that brings criminal matters, not just against the general public, but also against officers in government, right? So maybe corruption, right? If there's a corruption case and it has to be brought to court as a prosecution, then it's done by the DPP, right? So there have to be certain protections that are there for the DPP that wouldn't exist if the DPP was a department under the Attorney General.
Got you.
Yes.
Got you. That's what I wanted to understand.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I guess these things will continue evolving and, getting better with time. When we're speaking about DPP and corruption and separation and people and stuff, I was reading this week's Miri, last week's Miri actually. Shout out Matala, one of my favorite journalists in the country. She wrote this article, and no, we're not going to discuss it. It's very gossipy. We'll talk about it off with the microphone. It's very gossipy. It talks about a DPP official who, was in a certain area and they were like a boss in that area, and then they moved to somewhere else, and then now they're back and they've been demoted. And it's that's why we don't need to discuss it. That's for me and the listener.
I get you.
Yeah,
and I think that's one of the debates that are ongoing, right?
Yeah.
To say, when you look at the DPP, and I have to be frank, the debate yet thing, I haven't heard it included the Attorney General's chambers, the Attorney General herself.
Okay.
But the ongoing debate, DPP, the DCEC, right?
Yes.
To say, how do we create an environment, and I think Ombudsman as well.
Okay.
How do we create an environment where these institutions can function optimally and execute their mandate without fearing there'll be interference from wherever with their work, especially when it comes to issues of corruption. Because corruption is always government related.
100%.
I've actually never heard it. Corruption was an element of government in it, right?
Yeah.
So now, if you are holding an office where you have to hold people in government to a certain standard, what protection is there for you?
Yes.
Or you won't be interfered with. You will be able to execute your mandate properly and all of these things.
Job security,
like security of tenure.
Yeah, 100%.
But also, there has to be a balance. Or if you have security of tenure, like a judge, a judge will appoint you until, is it 75? I think it's 75.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not sure. Someone will confirm for me, but I think it's around 75. So if I'm appointed a judge, 40, basically the next 35 years, sharp. Unless there's a reason I'm impeached, right? But that's because there are other judges.
Yeah.
Now imagine a situation where there's something like that for the DPP or DCEC, where the head is there for like 25, 35 years. Do we still, is that right? Number one, right in the sense, if this person is corrupt, right?
Yeah.
And they are the ones who are in charge of the DCEC.
Yeah.
Will they investigate themselves?
100%.
No, they will not.
Yeah.
So then it means we're stuck with this person for the next 25 years, merely horribly corrupt. Right? So I don't know in my mind how the balance can be struck.
I guess we'll see.
I know, right?
See. I think, and this is a question that I go around asking people in different fields all together. I was talking to a doctor recently. Okay, in the health sector, how do you guys feel about the changes in government, the changes in, and I guess I should ask you the same question. It's been how many months? 4 or 5 months now?
Yeah.
And how do you feel in the legal field? How are you guys feeling? What's the vibe and the mood like in terms of the direction that, things are being taken, the conversations that are being had right now, because nothing concrete has been done yet?
I cannot answer that question. And the reason why I am saying I cannot answer that question is because I'm very unhappy right now. Some people at some institution that is legal related because they're not doing things right according to the law, right? And so I feel that because of this interaction and how soon it is, it colors my objective view, right?
Yeah.
And I might say, matakala, nothing is going right. And it's only because of this particular interaction that I had. So I'm very fearful of giving my opinion because of that.
Okay.
Maybe if you ask me next week and I'm happy.
Also, in the case. Okay. I need to stay on your PA. Find out. Oh man. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting stuff, man. I saw a conversation. This is me completely going off the rails now. I saw a conversation recently about it's very rare, or you've never had an instance where a private company or a private entity is involved in corruption. It's an element of public funds, right? Yeah. And I want to ask you this, P. How do you feel about nepotism in the private sector? Because in the public sector, 100%, that's wrong. Yes. You know, you're using public resources. No, it doesn't make sense. In the private sector, I have a company, right? My company is into textiles. We make absolutely amazing hats as we do. And I have a nephew who just finished school and is sitting at home not really doing much, you know? And I'm like, people have been applying to the company to get a job. And I'm like, I want to spy. And then I give my nephew a job. And, you know, I'm thinking, is that wrong? And I'm not talking about legal. I'm talking about morally. You know, I found it very interesting. I was like, man, I wish I was still. You know, sometimes I hear these conversations. I'm like, man, I wish I was still on the radio so we could just, hash it out, me and me, chop it up, get some calls in. So you know, because we see other communities doing it. You know, I don't want to say other races because you know that's a bit racist. Other communities, we see other communities doing it very, very well, where it's the companies being run by the fourth generation, the fifth generation, you know, especially in more farming. The farm, this farm has been in the family since the 1800s, you know. But it seems like when it comes to us,
who is us?
Regular Botswana, black folk, you know, we don't. It's just like, yo, how you niece, bro?
Carlos, before I answer your question, a few years ago,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I'd ask people, okay, define for me,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And the people would go racist, would go xenophobic, and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd listen, right? And then my follow-up question would be, okay, so how far back in the history of this nation or this country or whatever do we go in order for you to be validated as a Motswana? Do we go to the point when the Bantu speakers came to this region? Do we go to the point where it was just the Khoi and all that? Or do we go even further? How far back do we go, right? And I say this because sometimes, Mogochana especially, we are very mixed.
Yes,
right. We have families in Zimbabwe, we have families in South Africa predominantly. And then depending on the region of the country, we have families in Namibia or Zambia and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So we tend to be mixed in that way, but we tend to forget a lot of us are mixed.
Yes.
So and I say this because sometimes I hear elements of eugenics, but they don't want to admit it, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, which ones do you give priority? Do you give priority to the ones or do you give priority to your cousin's fifth uncle? Or do you give priority to or do you give priority to your friend? Because sometimes we're closer to our friends than our family members.
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Kana ke itsile gore wena wa bo etsa ke itsile gore wa go mthama ya wa go ntsenya mo kgweding ya no ka se molao nya bonolo kare ngwana ga mmago ga ana tiro go na le motho o mongwe wa playing o e se ngwana ga mmago a o itse. Do you give the job to this person who applied, or do you give the job to your mother's son, who is, you're thinking, your mother's child, who is not all the way qualified like this other person who applied for the job, but they can still do the job?
Yeah, look, na Carlos, all these things. If you say to me you want a job, you're gonna get a send CV, come for interview, right? And I say this because having someone as a family member doesn't necessarily always work for your organization.
I find that it's very rare that it works.
It's very rare that it works, right?
Yeah.
And so, if it comes down to it, because for me, when a person asks for a job, it's not just about qualification. Passion comes into play and the ability to work hard, right? Yeah. So for me, if you're qualified, but you know, but only passion, only hard work, you're the person for me, because I know you'll go to bat. Okay. But really, I forget it.
Because now the problem now comes where you know, we had a post recently in the company that needed to be filled, and we could have filled it with a family member who's like really close to us, my wife and I, and you know, we were just like, the problem with putting someone in that situation is no, I can't come to work on Friday because no, you know what I mean? And it's like, my man, okay.
Yeah, so for me, it's not even a moral question. It's a question of what is best for my organization.
It's a question of merit.
Yes.
And
I will say it.
Yeah, no,
I'm like, is this person qualified? Send a CV. Let's have an interview.
Yeah.
And there are people who will waltz in an hour late for an interview. I'm like, clearly you don't want the job.
Okay, so they come in for the interview and they're 100% and they are the same level as a complete stranger. They are, you know, everything, capabilities, hard work, etc, as a complete stranger.
Okay, my family member.
Okay.
I don't even want to lie.
You see?
Right?
Yeah.
And I say this because I'm not receiving public funds. Right?
Yes.
I'm running my own organization.
Yes.
And if they are on the same level and at par, I'll hire the family member.
Yes.
I know it's not the politically correct thing to say, but it's what happens.
It's what happens.
Right? And pick up phone
yeah, 100%. Okay, all right, no, cool stuff. B, we've been talking for like 40 minutes.
I know, right?
35 minutes.
I keep looking at my phone because the last time we tried to record, we had technical difficulties. Carlos,
and it was such an awesome conversation.
It was such a great conversation.
And you were wounded, my dog. I saw the way you were flat, walking to the car. Oh no, hey dog.
Maybe like it's an assistant daddy say.
Oh, stress. When you said you're not well last week, I was like, that's a lie because stress is already recording. Okay, so what do you want to do? Because legal capacity is quite
lengthy.
It's quite lengthy. Yeah. The conversation we're supposed to have today is quite lengthy. And I was thinking, well, okay, maybe we can talk about company, but now I don't want us to talk about company now because there's a bit of prep that I need to do, especially with regards to the OBRS system, because there's been changes that have been happening with the OBRS system.
Yes, given it's really offline, I think it came back online today.
Yeah, on the 8th.
And even interference, the interface thing is very different.
It's different, yeah. It's been off for like a week until the 18th, 19th or something like that. And they're trying to, apparently, that thing that you spoke to me about before, not the corporate veil, but the benefactor. Is it benefactor? Is it called benefactor?
Beneficial owner.
Beneficial owner, yes. Apparently.
Constitution, for all companies, I guess.
But now, okay, here we are now talking about it. We're not supposed to talk about it, but just quickly. When they say they don't know who the final beneficial owner is, what do they mean? Because it's there. You can go and see in such a company, and then you see what and if it's a business that's owned by a company, you can see what the company. You can follow the trail. Is it? I don't know. Am I missing something? The usual fronting and etc.
Yes, so it is an issue of fronting, but there are multiple aspects to it. So fronting, usually the general definition, I think, if I'm holding shares, right, and putting myself out to be the true owner of these shares.
Yeah.
But in fact, yeah. Right?
Okay.
That's fronting. Right. So what the beneficial owner question is, are the shares yours truly? Kana but you're pretending like they're yours. Because what's a nominee?
Yes.
The law allows for a nominee. For me to declare what I'm holding the shares for you. But then if I'm holding the shares for you, it then means, especially if you're not a citizen, there are certain limitations in relation to certain things that are reserved for citizens.
Benefits and stuff,
that the company might not be able to benefit from. Already tender, and it's a tender that's like specifically set for the citizens, right? Because you find sometimes, depending on which law you look at, citizen, it could mean 51% citizen-owned shares, or it can be 100% citizen-owned shares, right? And then you have situations where a company will be owned by another company, and that company that owns the shares of that company is a foreign company, right? Like, hey, Panama Papers, you know?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
So a company that has been incorporated in some island somewhere, and then that company that they hold the shares in a company in Botswana 100%, and then how there's a limit in relation to how far you can search. Unless island and then you find out that country is like, no, we're not going to disclose that type of information, right? So now then it would have to be a situation. No. Remember, a beneficial owner cannot be a juristic person. It cannot be an entity. It has to be a natural person. So if you have that situation where a company owns shares in another company fully or even in part, and that company is a foreign company, you have to tell us, this foreign company, who is the natural person? Yes.
Because there has to be a human being at the end of all of this. Okay. No, we'll discuss Companies Act very, very soon. It's one of my favorite acts ever when we discuss these things.
And there's so many amendments that have come into being, not just even in the Companies Act, Societies Act. There are a lot of amendments that have come into the laws.
And that means you guys have to keep up.
Yes, we have to keep up.
And shout out to the president. He announced today finally the forensic audit we've been waiting for kickstarted today. Well, this is getting uploaded. I think we can now, the cat's out the bag in this day and age of podcasting and whatever. People know we're not live. We didn't record this on Monday. We just uploaded it on Monday. But he announced, I guess because it's being uploaded today on Monday, he announced last week, the forensic audit is kickstarting today actually. And there's a company that's been enlisted, that came to my mind when you spoke about Panama, because that's where people, that's where, Swiss accounts, where these tax havens. That's where we want to know sharp.
But as we're saying this, what came to mind as you're talking about this forensic audit? And the Scotland Yard. Or the Scotland Yard came and did investigations, and there's a report apparently, and this report is super sensitive and all that because there's so many people implicated, right? So I'm wondering if we're not going to have situations like that, where we have this in-depth forensic audit, and then it says says, and then available, what not a chance.
Yeah, and the Ramotswaledi report comes to mind as well.
Yeah.
Where people bakulekile for this investigation to happen. But I think with this one, is a bit different because I was having a conversation with my wife earlier and I was saying, and she's like, "Ooh, so they were being for real. They're doing it. Why has it been quiet? All of a sudden they're doing it. They're doing it." And I was like, I think what's been happening is, this is coming from me, by the way. The views and opinions expressed on this show. I think what's happened is that there's been a lot of talk of the Red Opposition Party in the last 2 weeks. They're getting ready for their conference. People are raising their hands. No, now I'm running for chairmanship. I'm running for SG. And I'm running for presidency. And I feel like the current government was like, "Yo, so we've been giving you guys a little breathing space. I'll just show you." But now you guys are out here, showing off. Oh, okay, so I guess you guys ain't gonna do none to us. Then I guess we're just going to come out and have our conference and then come 2029, we're going to unseat you guys. And it's just like, let's remind these guys, things are, I think this one is going to come out because there's a humongous political element into it, because they said the audit is going to run from 2014 to 2024. So that means the immediate previous administration and the administration before that, I guess the last term of the administration before that. So for me, it's just like, there's a political element here and there's political will for them to release the results of this audit. And they know that Botswana are waiting for this audit more than any other. This one we are vested, personally interested. We were just like, no, but guys, when you guys come in front of us and say, there are no funds, come 2029, we're going to ask you the question again. No, but guys, you haven't done A, B, C, D. No, but there was no mine. And then we're going to say, but where was the mine? No, the money went, we don't know where the money went. You guys did a whole forensic, you spent, I think it's like what? I think they said like 50 million pula or something. You guys spent 50 million pula and you didn't give us anything. What do you guys say?
Okay. I understand now why you gave the disclaimer. Because, and then the way I'm hearing you is, you are saying that the audit is targeted. Almost. But
yes.
Here's my thing, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to the discussion we had about debt management and collection. And I'm not saying the audit should be done or shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
We are currently in a situation where we're saying there's no money, right? And in saying there's no money, we then spend 50 million for an audit.
Yeah.
Did he say how long the audit is going to take?
No, I didn't say.
Okay. We spend 50 million on this audit. And let's say the audit comes back and says, Bonolo una hile 100 million during COVID. Right? And then how will Bella Bonolo is Amela Gadina? Then what? Is it not a situation where you're throwing good money after bad?
No, I don't think so. Because I believe, and it's so funny that you're saying this, because I remember literally like the weekend after the elections, I was sitting I find myself, I love those moments. I love those conversations. I'm there for the conversation because I know so I'm always the youngest and I'm always just there intrigued and listening. And the conversation was obviously around, okay, so he needs to go after the previous guys. And then I said, no, but we can't do that because now we're going to have the same situation as the guy who just left, because you saw how him and the previous guy were fighting, and it's a fight that went nowhere and it did nothing for the country. It just divided us and just, and these guys were like, hey, these people allegedly have taken a lot of money from government, and they've built properties and have done this and that and that, and not specifically the president or anyone, just generally the people who are, you know what I mean? They've done this and this and whatever. So we need to get that money back. Even if we get like, you know, one of the timers, he's a lecturer at UB, was saying, even if we get 20% back of what these guys took in the last 4 or 5 years, trust me, that 20% is going to do this. It will be this much of, you know, it will this and this and this based on how much. So my thinking is they arrived at this 50, they saw okay, as they said, and they said, do we have 50 million to spend on an audit? And then it was like, okay, let's just do our own internal investigations and just look around. You know, now they have the resources, they have the security arms, and they have the banking systems, and they have the BOB, they have the systems. And they looked around, and then the systems showed them, dog, 50 million is a drop in the ocean compared to what we can possibly recover from these folks.
Yes, and that's the thing, possible recovery.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, look, Carlos, if people can speculate, right?
Yeah.
But then we have documentation, unless this and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, land.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult for you to hide the theft of land.
Yeah.
Because of the way our system is, right? So if you can go to deeds or land board, this piece of land improperly. Why not just get the piece of land back, right? Why do you have to have a forensic audit? My understanding is forensic audit is effectively to try and identify things that are not easily identifiable in relation to what was ill-gotten gains.
Yes.
You get me?
Yeah.
And now the recovery is the one that becomes problematic. But are these ill-gotten gains still here? And if, for example, Madian Sitromobojana to the islands, how much more are we going to spend to try and recover that money back from the islands? Because then we go there, we litigate there under those laws. And maybe those laws say,
they support
no, to one of the islands, but because of the laws, no, you can't disclose certain information. My dear, I displace you from that island, right? I see you to different countries, and so how far do we follow this trail? Because it goes to recover, right? For those things that we can easily identify and recover. Why are we not going after them now? And then say out of all of the things we recovered, this is the amount that we're able to get for them. 250 million through the forensic audit. Now we're just doing a forensic audit. Like land.
Yeah. Okay. I hear you. And you know, I guess the idea, which is what I imagine was said before, what the president said before, if I'm not mistaken, I think I remember him saying something like this earlier in his term. He said, the reason why they're bringing an outside party and paying them all these tons of money, even though there's no money, is so that it doesn't appear to be tainted and targeted and used for political, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I hear you. I
get that, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? There are people who are outside of government in the country who can do the tracing.
Yeah.
Just the tracing of assets, right? Not an audit.
Yeah.
Or how the land. I'll ask you, where's this piece of land? And I say this because I've actually done homework here, going to deeds, going to land board, tracing the history of a piece of land.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying the audit is wrong or it's right.
Yeah.
I'm saying there's low-hanging fruit that doesn't require a forensic audit where you can say, since 2021 has one application is a company you get me?
Yeah. Nah, I get you. And, I'm not a big fan of having these kind of conversations with you because you use logic and it makes sense. But literally, what you're saying now makes sense because the audit is literally just going to identify if
Yes.
and all the things are there to be identified. And then from there, after we spend the 50 million on the audit, now we have to find more money now to go and trace these things and find them and get them back if it's a matter of getting them back.
Especially if it's money.
Yes. So yeah, I guess for me as a normal guy on the street, a layman, our thing is let's find out who resenyeditswe ke mang le gona o resenyeditse kae. You know what I mean? And we don't think about okay, and then what after that, and you find it can literally be enough for some people okay, and then we go and we litigate court case and then they're sent to prison. For us that would be enough, but that's not logical because 50 million the assets we didn't recover anything. We're putting this person in prison. We're paying for them inside the prison. And there's no, you know what I mean? And I guess the win there will be going back to be political.
Because you see, I'm sure there are plenty of whistleblowers. There's the gentleman when he shows up on your timeline, either on Facebook or X or wherever, about these allegations, people will stand up and listen, right? So I'm sure there are plenty of whistleblowers that say, this land, do you know about this, right? Well, I'm not saying the forensic audit is wrong. I'm just saying it's premature. In that, are there not things that are easily identifiable where you can show this is ill-gotten gains without having 50 million paid? The same thing that someone would have charged you 5,000 to tell you. You get me?
I get
and then afterwards, forensic audit, and then these things these 10 items out of 50, we've already dealt with them. And maybe they can even be used to raise money for part of the forensic audit. You get me?
I get you.
But now, when we say we have no money, and 50 million is not chump change.
That's a lot of money.
Right?
That's a lot of money.
I personally, and there are a lot of Bajana that might not agree with me, I personally think the 50 million could have been put to better use. Right? For the economy, while they do these investigations, right? And then after that's when you can say, no, we have more money now. Let's do forensic audit.
Yeah, but even further, so we need to do it now. We need to investigate them now. But I hear what you're saying, man. But unfortunately, what we always say, things they need to be done a certain way. But unfortunately, just because it's supposed to be done a certain way, that's not the way it's going to happen. Because as I said, there's the optics. You know, there's very much optics. These folks are in office because they were voted in, and the voters are making noise and saying, "But guys, this guy that you said was stealing, I just saw him at the filling station pouring money in his big V8 car."
Declaration of assets, Carlos.
Those sort of things, That's
Check out who declared the asset. Who declared the asset? Right? And are they legitimate assets? Like, you know what I mean? Like things that can be. Maybe I'm not a political animal.
We'll see.
But I will tell you one thing, Carlos. That report, number one, is either not going to be disclosed, right? Or number two, it's not going to be disclosed fully. Yes.
Yeah. Because there's just intertwined relationships and conflicts of interest also, because now if we're saying 2014 to 2019, that includes the administration of the president who helped to get into power also. Again, the views and opinions expressed on this show.
So no, I believe there will be no disclosure at all or there will be limited disclosure.
Redacted, there will be redactions.
Redaction or smaller report for public consumption and all these things.
This is going to cause public.
You can always find a reason under law for why you don't give disclosure.
You
like
damn lawyers. You damn lawyers.
No, national security. No, let's look at it legitimately, right?
Yeah.
Let's say there was an arms deal in relation to some former president or former minister or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it went to an existing institution and they did this and that and that and that.
Yeah.
Are you saying you want that in the public arena?
No, because now our enemies have the same information.
You know?
Yeah. Hey.
You know? Because I'm sure when I say like there will be no disclosure or partial disclosure, people are thinking, but there's certain information that cannot be in the public arena.
100%. Oh man. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I feel like I've deflated you now.
No, not at all. Because for me, I love these conversations because you know, you go on social media and it's just one side. It's just yeah. And when we have these conversations, 2 minutes. It's just like we need to have people thinking, "What want to mesh up, guys?" If this was your personal funds and your personal situation, would you approach it this way, or would you find a cheaper way to do it, a more logical, more efficient way to do it before we take 50 million and go and give it to
whoever,
these guys who have an office in New York? Right. April 26th, we have the employment. There's only more than 7 colors. Different.
Yeah, you know what? I was actually thinking the other day, we should have like a legal current affairs episode every now and then. 100%. That's what this is.
I don't even think it should just be legal. There's things where, you know, when the thing about it is it's always going to be legal because I'll bring it from and then you know, so yeah, I think so. I think maybe once a month we'll have these random conversations. I love them. Employment Act seminar.
Employment Law Seminar, yes.
Employment Law Seminar is coming up.
26th of April.
Yeah.
2025.
Yeah.
Fully online.
How are plans and preparations coming?
They're actually going really well, and a lot of people are registering, which is fantastic.
I love it.
Hey, by the way, you forgot my birthday.
I did. Huh? When I did,
and I let a month pass just to make sure. I get it. You forgot. You really forgot. Wow, Carlos.
Oh my word. Okay, I need to explain this birthday thing because you know mine is coming up next month, and last year I had completely forgotten because my wife wanted to do. Usually she reminds me like 2 weeks before, like birthday's coming up because she knows how I feel about birthdays. You know, there's this thing about how guys don't care about birthdays. I'm worse. You know why? I grew up in the Jehovah's Witnesses house.
Yeah.
And Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate birthdays or any holidays for that matter.
Yeah.
So birthdays to me were literally just another day.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas. I don't even send Merry Christmas messages because it was literally just another day. Like on my birthday growing up, I would wake up and nothing happened.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Just like, oh, okay.
It's just a normal day. And then when I came to varsity now, and you know, now I'm on my own and everything, and then I'm seeing how other people, like I've always known that people treat birthdays as a big deal.
Yeah.
But now when I saw people around me, because I always saw people, me not celebrating my birthday means even my folks didn't celebrate their birthdays.
Yes.
Even my siblings didn't celebrate their birthday.
Yeah.
The helper, the dogs, no one celebrates a birthday.
Yeah.
So now when I started seeing people around me and, you know, my other relatives also never used to bother because they know I get the situation.
Yeah.
Now my wife, who's my new relative who comes into my life at an older age, and she's just like, I don't understand what you mean when you say you don't celebrate birthdays. I started by celebrating hers, and then now I start paying attention to. It's only like I've been with my wife 13 years. It's only like 2 years ago when I realized, oh, her birthday is on the 26th of July. It's always, okay, it's somewhere in July.
Yeah.
And then I would always have like a reminder on my phone, or I'd go to Facebook and then a birthday, and then it would remind me, like, okay, sure, I need to get a gift. You know what I mean? So I'm very sorry I forgot your birthday, dog. I remember we had the conversation about it.
And because you're like, babe, don't forget my birthday. I was like, sure, Carlos.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, I can see Carlos or yeah. And I know exactly what I wanted to get you for your birthday, dog. But it's still coming. It's still coming. It's not.
No,
we're still in the year, so it's still coming. It's still coming.
One of our puppies is turning 1 in May. Just a few days before my fiance's birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're thinking of getting it like a little puppy cake. With plenty of pictures.
A friend of mine was cooking steaks for his dog.
Can you imagine? You know?
Wait, you have a dog?
I have 2.
Since when?
One, we got 2 actually last year, May, June. But one of the puppies passed away from parvo.
Oh, yeah.
And then in January, we got another one. So the smaller one, in May, June, is a Jack Russell Maltese mix. So energy is off the chains.
Too much.
And then the one that we adopted in January is Rottweiler Bobo mix.
Yeah.
So the energy is down there. So yeah.
Oh man.
But fortunately, he's a puppy as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Those big ass paws.
With the huge paws.
Yeah.
He's 4 months
gorgeous,
now. So by the time he is fully grown, he's gonna be a monster.
He's gonna be a giant. Those are gorgeous dogs. Man.
Yeah.
Very super protective. I really relax there.
Yeah.
Try and do something to the kid of the house or the other smaller dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I see it because Ang likes to jump on me, right?
Yeah.
Because of all the energy. So I'd say, Ang, no, I like it, and then he creates a barrier between myself and Ang.
Yeah. Oh man. Listen to us talking about dogs.
Thank you, Carlos.
It was fantastic. Clearly we just need to have a podcast of just conversations. And,
hey, even speaking of which, I'm like, did you see the podcast there, South Africa?
Oh, Piano Pulse.
Piano Pulse!
With reason. Man, that filled my heart with so much joy, Bonola. You cannot understand how happy that made me. Because, and I was saying this, Jorge, the thing about the new age media, with podcast the way, the difference with that and traditional media is that traditional media, there's a regulator.
Yes.
Which in Botswana is Bokra.
Yeah.
And then there's the bosses or your boss. If you work at a radio station, say you work at the RNFM, right? Yeah. There's your boss. So say one of the presenters says something bad about you, Bonolo.
Yeah.
You can either go to the regulator or if you know the bosses or whatever the case is, you know, which I found when I was working on radio, what happened, someone would just call your boss and say, Chief Comrade, why are you guys speaking like this about my woman or something like that, right? And then your boss would come to you and say, my man, okay, let's understand, what was the story about? What was it? What's the benefit? Did you get both sides of the story? Did you do your the journalism? And the problem with the new age media is that there's none of that.
Yes.
You go on a podcast, there's no regulator. Podcast doesn't regulate podcast. There's no boss. These kids just, as long as you have a microphone and a camera, you can just set up and then you rock on your own.
Yeah.
Now, you speak about other people however you want, whenever you want. You're ruining people's families. You are discussing people's children, discussing people's wives, which it doesn't make sense to me. And there's no recourse. What's the recourse? The recourse is, I'm going to the legal system for defamation, etc. Defamation, how long does it even take? And you find it's just the simple matter of this person was speaking ill about my wife. You could have just easily handled it. You know what I mean? So I feel like maybe that's because I've been trying to figure out, okay, what needs to happen? Because you don't want over-regulation. You know what I mean? You want people to be free, to be able to express whatever the case is. But I was just like, okay, but how do we control this thing? Because it will get out of hand. Kind of what happens is you start off, you're like, okay, this is the boundary that I won't cross as far as my content goes, you know, and then you're getting 100 likes every week. And then that 100 likes, you're like, okay, how do I get to 150? Maybe let me go a bit further. So you push the boundary. There's no boundary. Eventually you realize, well, oh, so I can just say whatever I literally want to say, even if I'm lying on this person's name, nothing can happen. The only backlash, or if this person doesn't have the legal capacity or the money for legal, nothing is going to happen to me. That to me is a problem.
You know what? I think it depends on the country you're in and the area you're in. I say this because, yes, there is a lack of regulation. But fortunately, there is a limit to the number of platforms that can be used for podcasts, right? So you have your YouTube, your Spotify, Apple Music, you know, a few here and there, but you know, there are about 7 or so that are the main, podcast platforms, right? And you find, well, yes, people are allowed to actually push the boundaries a bit too far. And only when there's a lot of backlash and mass reporting do like platforms like both Twitch and stuff then suspend content creators and all that. But that only works insofar as content creators are making money off of those platforms, right? Because it's the bag that gets hit. And that's why you find some content creators in the US and in the UK are very they'll take reckless, but there's a limit.
There's 100%,
right?
100%.
Like the guy that got jailed in Scandinavia, I don't even want to say his name, that dude.
That guy.
Yes, he got deplatformed. YouTube, Spotify, Twitch, all over. And there's an American guy as well that had a podcast and and it really hit their pockets really badly because that was their source of income. The problem that we have here, and I think even some platforms in relation to South Africa, is because they're not getting paid for this by the platform. They're getting sponsors, and maybe they create a business through the sponsorships and the stuff, and that's how you get paid. So the way you hit them is by going to the sponsors, right? And having the sponsors actually say, no, we're backing out because we don't want to be associated with this.
With nonsense.
But are sponsors willing to do that?
That's the problem.
Right? Do they have morality clauses in their agreements with these content creators and all that? Because I understand it's under the Podcast and Chill umbrella.
Yes, it is.
So
and violence is never the answer.
Hey, drop a mic. That dude had his eyes were doing this. He even moved back a bit because now a hot slap is about to come out of nowhere.
I don't know, man. I just feel like there's a lot of, you know, the kids of today. And here's the thing, I'm not even worried about today's kids and today's podcasters. I'm just worried about the future. You know, I'm worried about the kids who are seeing these guys get their numbers off of being reckless. And they're going to come in. At least they still, as you're saying, it's under Podcast and Chill, which is McG, which as much as McG is extremely disappointing, like 90% of the time, because he's been through journalism training. You know what I mean? He worked at a radio station. He knows regulations and whatever. And then my issue with him is obvious. He knows exactly what he's doing. You know what I mean? My problem is with the kids who won't know what they're doing. They think this is the way to do things. McG knows when he's doing the wrong thing. He knows. You can tell.
And he pushes the envelope.
He pushes it so far because
allegedly,
because he knows there's absolutely nothing you can. What are you going to do? You're going to send me a letter from your lawyer? Yeah, great. I'm going to take that thing and use it in the bathroom. And he will say these things on the podcast. We wipe ourselves in the toilet with those things. You know what I mean? And my worry is the next kids who are coming after you, we're not showing them, there should be some sort of line that you can't cross when you're discussing other people. You know, if I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just getting old, but it just, that kid should have caught a slap.
Carlos, we do not advocate for self-help. And you know, I was actually quite surprised because I thought the reason had been scheduled to be there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then as the story unfolds, I find out that he tracked them down. He tracked them down to find out where they were recording and was there.
And he showed up, Which, shout out to Reason for that, because if it was a violent situation, he could have handled it another way.
Yes.
He could have found them, but he wanted to make a point by coming on their podcast while they're recording and sit there and say, okay, guys,
say what you said.
Let's
say it to my face.
Let's have the conversation, Yeah. So I don't know, man. I just hope, it's like when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on stage.
Yeah.
Soon after, now all of a sudden people were rushing stages where comedians were on stage.
Yeah.
And then that one guy rushed the stage when it was Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
And then we saw the pictures of what happened to that guy. Exactly. He was in the wheelchair and he was crumpled up and whatever. And then since then we didn't hear of any stage rushes. You know what I mean? And it's just like, okay, we don't condone violence, but sometimes it's just like something like that, the Reason thing, it needs to happen to just show people, hey, we're not just having a conversation, the two of us in a boardroom. There are people, this is people's lives we're talking about, So no to violence, but shout out Reason, man.
But I worry about the security for these guys then. If their location can just be disclosed like this, and they're allowed to talk whichever way they want to talk, I think it's exposing them a bit too much,
and
right?
that's where reckless, because in a radio station at least there's security in place. There's all those things are there for the protection of not just the presenter, but the protection of whoever you're speaking about as well. There's a whole thing
there's
there.
A mechanism.
There's a mechanism there that protects everyone to some extent. You know what I mean? But these kids, they have the same platform as a radio station, but they don't have the protections in place. You being able to say whatever you want, you might think that's just a freedom for you. That's a nice time for you. But you have no idea what that could cause for you.
Exactly.
And these kids who are coming, they have no idea. They think, oh, you just take a camera, you take a microphone, and you just speak ill of people, which is another thing I don't understand about the world that we live in now. I guess it's always been this way, but now it's more prominent because of social media. Why is it that people gravitate towards the nonsense or not?
Because I will explain it to you by using an analogy.
Yes, please.
Right? So the Colosseum, according to history, was built in order to feed people the blood and violence that they craved, right? That's why the Colosseum was created, to have these gladiator games, because people thrive in chaos. People enjoy chaos, right? So even as we impart knowledge, right, we won't get the engagement and views because what we are talking about is not delicious and chaotic and
salacious.
Exactly. People love chaos and salacious stuff. In fact, one was it a teacher or something who said to me, how about the Barnabas Koloba Izising? Hey, did you hear about and that's when they're like, oh, you know what I mean? Because I don't know what it is about human beings, but we seem to like that.
Man, bro. And then what that does is that it gives validation to another nonsense, where now the nonsense pushers feel like, but you guys are saying what I'm doing is nonsense, but look at the numbers. And MG. It's just like, we have 1 million subscribers, we're the biggest podcast in Africa. If you guys are saying our podcast is nonsense, it's just like, and the kids follow that. Now we're seeing it in Botswana. I get it. There's another podcast situation in Botswana, which is essentially like a MG podcast.
Really?
It's like a mirror of,
Oh, I didn't know.
Now, Lebone, they've introduced their own, because that piano pulse is essentially the Ma 2000 of MG. MG is more for the older audience, and
I see.
The piano pulse is for the younger audience, the 2000. The same sort of situation has happened in Botswana, where there's the MG and then there's the Ma 2000 platform, which the Ma 2000 platform, Lebone, literally like 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were in trouble for just speaking foul, incorrect things which were wrong about people, and it was just like, it was trending, obviously, because it's the same as this piano pulse thing. It's trending now. They're getting the numbers. They're like, you see the numbers.
And that's the thing. It as much as some people feel reason was justified.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying whether or not he's justified.
Yeah.
This is extreme engagement.
Yeah.
Because there are people who saw clips in whatever platform and they went to
the full thing.
The full thing and be like, okay, no, let's hear this.
Yeah.
And then they're like, actually, let's hear the one before that triggered this. 100%. Right? And that's engagement.
Man.
And then it feeds the machine.
It feeds the machine,
yeah.
dog. And we think, okay, that's the food the machine wants.
Yeah.
Let's give it more.
Yeah.
And now we have a society that's just where are we even getting our news? Where are we having like normal discussions about just the regular life? What's going on, dog?
Yeah.
But also, now I'm very biased because I'm very much from traditional media, the school of traditional media. So that's why I'm just frustrated with these kids, man. I'm just like, man, and that's not good for anyone. It's not good for the person who was shopping. It's not good for you. It's not good for the. It's just not good, you know. But
yeah, go to buy si we go to khoteng awan. Yeah, my friend believer ya thupe ya khot. Yeah, go khoteng o hore ba nthugile ba mo pege madela.
Been real deep.
Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thanks, B.
It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Always awesome. I go, man. I've got like 2 hours.
Get it.
Sharp.
Catch the Botswana Thinking Law podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and catch Botswana Thinking Law on various social media platforms, Facebook, X, TikTok, and so on, where we talk about Botswana law in English and Setswana.